Let's get into the main topic of the day. Global PLEX market coming on the 7th of July. So we did just come out with a video that was all about the friction fleet free PLEX and the dev blog and my thoughts about it and kind of the history of PLEX. I encourage you to go watch that first if you haven't already, and then come back and watch this one. Yes, I agree. But the important thing here is that CCP actually put out like a dev interview, and we're going to go through this and see what we have to say about it. Now, I have watched Nth Dimensional, another really good EVE Online content creator, did a reaction video, and I popped my head in there while he was doing it, and I watched it just long enough to realize that, like, I really needed to do my own. They talk about some very interesting stuff in this video. I don't know everything because, like I said, I've only watched like that one little segment out of context. So I'm interested to go through this and share my thoughts with you guys. Let's get into it.
We're here today to discuss a little bit about the recent updates announced in, well, last week's dev blog. I'm CCP Monty, and I'm joined by CCP Ratati and CCP Swift.
I don't actually know this guy. He must be new to the community team or something. CCP Monty. CCP Ratati is, of course, an infamous leader of the EVE Online. He is one of the three people that are like the tippy top deciders of EVE, and he often has to play the bad guy when it comes to like the economics of EVE and the ecology of the economics of EVE. You know, people that are upset that, like, you know, every once in a while I see complaints of like, oh, a person can't like mine or get all of the resources that they need to build their own battleship because like different things come from different areas. A lot of that is like CCP's Ratati's brainchild, which, to be fair, like isn't necessarily negative. The whole point of it is to like there's supposed to be causes for stimulation of trade and like an economy and an ecology within EVE, and so trying to foster that has been a big part of his project through scarcity, through you know, various changes that have happened in EVE in the last 5 years. But yeah, he's definitely had to play as the villain and or bearer of bad news in like EVE history. And then of course CCP Swift is a community manager within EVE, but he is a good dude. He was Elise Randolph when he was an EVE player. He was one of the leadership of Pandemic Legion. He was really big into AT. He's an incredibly cheerful dude. He loves EVE. He's like a hyper geek about EVE. I will say, like, some people have even said like they think that he's almost like it's for show because of no, CCP. The people don't like Ratati because of scarcity and everything that entailed. But anyway, so CCP Swift is just like, he is this guy. He's just very authentic. He's very friendly. And he loves EVE Online and Starship. So this should be an interesting discussion.
Welcome, guys.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, nice.
You've been in the studio, right? Before the new studio that we're using.
Yeah, I love it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's a cool little space for us to like just hang out and talk about EVE stuff.
I do like the fact that this has much more of like we're making a podcast vibe instead of we're trying to do a live stream vibe. Looks good.
And just kind of nerd out. It's a great excuse to do so.
I had to turn down all the lighting when Swift walks in because the smile just brightens every single room that this guy walks into. CCP Ratati, you're here with us for the first time also, but
we're going to make sure to like the video, as you should do with all videos that you like, including mine.
I mean, everybody that's watching knows you better than me or such. So
You'd be surprised.
You'd be surprised, yeah. Guys, we're here to talk about mainly the recent announcement to the PLEX market, the global PLEX market.
Yep.
Ratati, you maybe want to start off with just explaining to everybody what that is.
Yeah, there's a long history around the PLEX market. So
So I respect what they're doing, but just to make sure that we can get through it all, and we can slow it down if we need to, I'm actually going to speed it up to 1.25 times and see how that goes, just so we can try to get through this in a little bit less time.
CCP basically, before everyone else, introduced this concept of trading a token for subscription. This is way back, probably, 15 years ago?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Even before World of Warcraft, but World of Warcraft absolutely, and Blizzard actually kind of jumped on it 2 years later or something like
I
this.
remember going to the local computer store before that, buying scratch cards.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That basically was the kind of idea around it. It's legalizing that.
Can you imagine not being able to log into your favorite video game because the shipment of scratch cards with codes did not arrive before the weekend?
So one thing that just came up on my social was, do you remember this kind of moment where everyone had these, it was called the radio station, TV Station 2 in Iceland. So we only had the one, and then we had TV Station 2. It was a private company, and they had to do these decoders. So you'd get the decoder, and then you would get in the mail like an 18 kind of like digit thing where you just like, okay, this is your monthly subscription. You have to type it into the decoder, like 81876. But sometimes you get lucky, and somehow your decoder kind of like didn't refresh. So you got like a free month after. That was like the best thing ever.
Wait, are you guys old enough to have bought video games as text and literally programmed them into, I remember a mate of mine telling me about it, that he had to buy like almost like a book and program, basically write up the program.
The Single Spectrum was one. So my wife is actually, she wanted like this, but she's older than me. So she did that, and I didn't, because it was kind of like pre my time. I had an Amstrad, didn't code anything on it, but everyone who had a Single Spectrum.
CSPO Kami has definitely come in and gotten a lot of positive vibes about him. And I think that he's earned it. I'm very hopeful about like, he seems to have he brings a really good perspective and balance to the leadership team.
Usually, like, I think they got like a coding book to create some code and a game.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's crazy how like technology, just even in gaming, has progressed in just like a couple short years.
Yeah,
only a few short decades.
Yeah.
And if you think that's crazy, we've already done a segment way out of what we're going to do, and I love it. But yeah, back to the global PLEX market and the whole history of it.
So the components are, we have this token you can trade for subscription, and PLEX was basically the introduction. The 500 PLEX meant you could buy a 1-month subscription. Then PLEX became more of a digital currency for loads of services, what we call utility goods in this blog. So in the blog, we tried to define a lot of this history.
So a couple things. First of all, the elevator pitch of what's happening is, while you do have to still pay the fees of the location that you're at in order to put it on the market, PLEX is no longer going to have a location when it's on the market. So if somebody puts a PLEX on the market in Dodixie, it'll be purchasable in Jita. Like there's the actual purchasing, there's no location anymore for PLEX starting on the 7th. Wherever you are, you can buy it. Wherever you are, you can sell it, as long as you can like access the market.
That has never been defined. So it's really going in.
One thing I do want to point out, though, is that there was actually a transition period here where, like, it used to be that, so there's one PLEX, and one PLEX was 1 month of game time. And then when they wanted to make microtransaction type things with like clothing and stuff and later skins, they used a microplex that they called Aurum. You could break Plex into Aurum and then spend Aurum on premium stuff. And then around 2015 or so, they decided that it was very silly for there to be two different currencies. And so they just split Plex into microplex, basically, converted all Aurum and all Plex into Plex. And now basically 500 Plex now is the equivalent of 1 Plex before. And so from that, it kind of grew out as a universal commodity for premium goods for players. So from there, you get skill extractors, you get skins, we get Skinner, etc. But like that transition was already started all the way back in like 2011.
Into like, okay, a lot of this happened over time, but we never.
In JSpace, if you have a Fortizar and that Fortizar has a market, you can buy Plex and you can sell Plex on it. That's it. That's the answer.
Put a word to it, a description of it, like definitions of it. So kind of abstracting everything, putting it in perspective, giving the context of like, okay, this is kind of what we're doing. We never really explained everything. So this blog is a kind of a historical review, but also trying to like set the record straight of like how we want to approach it. So it's defining our monetization strategy. This is something we talked about at FanFest to kind of just have more open, honest communication about the things we're doing. We have had a couple of monetization devlogs recently, and this is just one more, so that we can debate the actual things we're talking about rather than kind of imagined or perceived, let's say. So this is all about PLEX. PLEX is a digital currency that is connected to real-world money. It's the only thing really that's connected to real-world money. And
it's a highly traded item as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it is part currency, part asset somehow in the core gameplay of it.
Yeah, and
I'm pretty sure it represents a significant amount of the trading in game, especially commodity like based trading.
even investment too. Like
yeah.
What's up,
some
Malik?
of the core investments that players make.
It's like there's three things I hold: coffee, gold, and PLEX.
Yeah. It's the safest investment for sure. It's like buying gold. And we want to basically level it up a bit, have it become an actual currency, closer to an actual currency. So when we talk about in the blog, more liquidity, fairer pricing, or like more stable pricing, it's basically the idea that more supply and more demand, they approximate the fairest prices quickly. But today we have this issue of supply being regional, and a lot of the trade is actually happening through contracts. We're not going to solve everything at the same time, but the most important thing is to try to increase liquidity, which means...
Well, you can say that there are problems with people using it excessively as a source of investment, and also acknowledging that that is a use case. Like, that is the difference between, like, you're designing for human behavior. So it's, yeah, it's the reality of it. And so that becomes like the control or the constraint that you have to design around.
Means to increase the supply. And we don't want everyone that wants to buy PLEX or to sell PLEX to actually have to travel to JITA or one of the 4 hubs. Yeah. We just want to be like, on demand. I need some PLEX, can just get some PLEX. It shouldn't be that hard.
I kind of love the fact that in the video game I love and play every day, I can use jump drives, I can use dark gates, but internet banking, no.
No.
I think that this is something that we talked about in the PLEX video the other day, which is that I don't know if they're going to touch into this too much, but it's something that I'm really interested in, which is that, like, JITA has these advantages because it is the place that people go to trade. So the fact that you can now do this anywhere is actually a blow against JITA and a boon to any other trade hub, because now it's just one more thing, and a pretty big thing, that you're not limited to go to JITA in order to deal with it. So it's one less thing that like hinders people from using Amar or Heck or Zarzak or their wormhole as a trading hub.
That's forbidden. So I think the idea here is then in the devlog, we try to kind of abstract things like what's a currency, what's a digital item, what makes sense in our universe to be able to transfer freely versus what are kind of real world commodities that like have intrinsic value and are, let's say, combat, like, I don't know, they have a pay to win aspect to it. You don't want to teleport some things around the universe because they need to have risk involved in moving them, hauling them across the universe. So like these are the real world items, the things that players make. CCP makes PLEX. CCP makes a lot of things, and a lot of them actually contribute nothing to balance in that sense.
Yeah. So
we are trying to like do this. We did a couple of attempts of Venn diagrams of physical items, real world items, digital. Like this is the best we did. It's good enough to explain enough. It's not like a perfect matrix. There's no diagram that just explains everything, but the core concepts are there, and we want to be able to use these definitions to go forward to explain why we're doing certain things, etc.
Yeah, and we talk to the players about it as well. We want to make sure everyone's got like a level playing field, which I think is super important, of just like knowledge of what we refer to things as, what we view things as, and stuff like that. So no one has to make like a weird assumption like, oh, CCB did this. This is probably what they meant by it. And then just we kind of lose the entire like good bones of the conversation that way.
I think it's also worth noting, I said last time around, I'm a returning player to EVE. So interacting with PLEX in the way the PLEX has been for the last few years was something that was pretty new to me in many ways. And I was really glad when I heard about this, and I was telling you about this the other day in our small chat, that just the whole process of having PLEX in a PLEX vault and moving into your inventory, and then it's stressful, and it is not a very new player kind of friendly thing to do. So in my mind, this change to actually just make this more streamlined makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Just to remove that friction when we have something that's connected to real world currency, that is not an item that is maybe as easily scammed or manipulated or something like that as many others.
Well, so okay, here's an interesting way to think about it, because like a good thing to compare this to is skill books, right? Skill books are another thing that is provided by CCP in the form of like NPC buy orders, right? But like there's still a value in the skill books. You know, buying a skill from the UI has a 30% markup. Why? Because even though the thing comes from CCP, the fact that it gets moved to a more convenient location for another player, that is value provided by the player that's doing the moving. So the idea is that, you know, nullsec groups can go and buy the skill books and bring them to their area, and they can sell for a 10% markup, and it's still 20% cheaper than buying it from the UI. So the people get 20% off the cost of the skill. You get 10% for your effort of actually coming and providing those skill books, right? But what's really happening here is that we're encouraging people through like the production of that value to actually do that task, buy up skill books, move it to somewhere that's more convenient, and sell them there, right? And the reason why the game would want you to do that is because the act of moving that stuff is a thing to do, right? You have to load it up into a ship. You have to figure out how to get that ship to one place to another. It's always been a dumb idea to move PLEX, but people have still done it in the past. You know, there's always been, every once in a while, a ship will get blown up with a bunch of PLEX. And I've talked to people before. It's not, you know, people like to say it's RMT or whatever, but like it used to be that this was pretty consistent. Like it happened because, again, some nullsec groups, there are people that need PLEX in their pocket or whatever, and they don't go to JITA. So there's other people that buy PLEX in JITA and run it out to their nullsec group to sell it there for a premium, right? But eventually CCP came out with the PLEX Vault. The PLEX Vault means that there is no risk anymore. There is no actual transportation that's done by that person that's moving the PLEX from their market to their nullsec. In fact, because PLEX Vault is universal across your account, you could just log in your JITA alt, buy the PLEX, log in your main, put the PLEX on the market instantly. There is no actual task to be rewarded by doing that market arbitrage, which is why it makes sense to remove the locality of PLEX altogether. That PLEX does not exist in a physical location. It exists in a abstract digital space, but still can be bought and sold on the market, right? And so I think that the problem that they're trying to solve is there are, like, PLEX has become increasingly used as a commodity between people, but the physical nature of it has caused limitations that do things like affect other trade hubs, affect people's ability to access it or need to rely on JITA, causes people to hoard it a lot better, causes it for prices to fluctuate in ways that are kind of inconsistent. And so, you know, they're treating it like it's a physical, like a locality based item that doesn't actually have locality, because you can always just move it to the PLEX Vault and then move it out of the PLEX Vault. So you can move it safely. Anybody who's moving it as a physical item has made a critical mistake. Even like there's no actual excuse to move it as a physical item. You can always just move it safely in your PLEX Vault. So it makes sense to remove the locality of it altogether. That's I think pretty much the best argument that I can make for what's happening.
Exactly. There's a lot of that. Like, you don't want to play with that item, and I think specifically. So I think that's on that basically on the same path as we're doing. Is like, okay, let's try to simplify life for new players also. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of complexity. We don't need to, and fear of, let's say, being scammed generally, because like now Eve has this brand that like it's a place where people scam you. And
that's actually a really good point too. this is something I always say, which is that, you know, new players come into the game knowing exactly two things. One, that they don't know anything, and two, that they will be punished for any mistake that they make. And this causes a lot of people to not only, like, it basically just causes them to shut down. Like, they can't necessarily build their knowledge base and understand that, like, any mistake they do make, even if it's based on their own lack of knowledge, will be severely punished. And so they end up becoming extremely risk averse in their actions and and stick to safe paths, and then end up boring themselves
and grief you and gank you, etc. It's bad
instead of
enough,
exploring
and
the
you also
boundaries.
don't lose like actual real money by doing it. So I think that's one of those things that we're trying to like ease people into.
I also think like one of the fun things about it is that even though this might sound like in some ways it will change the Plex market from a kind of
that is correct, Nico. But the point is that to have things that are that people can grow into, right? It's about giving people. Like, I'm not saying that it's bad that this is true. I'm just saying that we need to be aware of that. Like, when we think that players are just going to figure things out or whatever, like, just know that, like, all they know is that everybody is terrible here and they don't know shit. And it's an incredibly complex game. And, like, that's their starting position. The most informed new players think those two things. And it's something that we have to keep in mind.
Buying, selling, hauling kind of perspective. I have a feeling, and this is not I'm not game designer or anything like this. This is just coming from me personally, that potentially we will see more players participate in kind of like an investment kind of strategies when it comes to their Plex, because it is central. It is something I can do everywhere. It's not something I need to have a specific character in a specific place to be able to participate in some form of market stuff. So I think that could be an interesting thing, and probably a little bit slower movements, you know, when it comes.
This is a huge blow to TTT. I know TTT's had a kind of a sordid history and it's not in its grand days before, but, like, this is probably the biggest blow to TTT ever. Oh, he's touting. Well, the point is that, like, the act of it being used as an investment is kind of cool. The fact that it becomes a tool of hoarding is a problem.
Comes to it's forex trading.
Why can't we just convince players to be more resilient to fund? That's part of the whole, like, that. Yeah, that is a cultural thing, and that's something that we have to continue to reinforce. And you see that rise up frequently,
rather than you know, something else. So
I think that's like part of the long-term vision, is to start treating all currencies more as a foreign exchange, but with like the regulations we need. We don't want everything to be like perfectly tradable, but there are some things where we might want to kind of ease. Like you could call it like in the 80s and 90s, there was like a lot of deregulation around like moving capital, like getting capital, like actually doing something that has return investment. So investing in rather than just like safekeeping currency. So in loads of cases, you have what's called like almost dead money. That's too little to actually make a difference. So there's a lot of people who have like a few Plex.
Yeah, exactly.
And no one really wants to buy 7 Plex and then 20 Plex. And like, it's just like it's a hassle. So especially if you travel to do so, to sell your 50 Plex or whatever you got from the daily goals or like any kind of seasonal reward or whatever. So I think this will enable people to just like, okay, get rid of this stuff, however or whenever.
Also, it was partly there already. It was just people had to know that they could essentially inject the Plex into their wallet
Yeah,
from
exactly.
wherever.
Yes.
So basically, seasoned or veteran players would know. While
it's not about making the game easier as a mechanic. It's about making the acquisition of experience and mastery of the game easier, right? Like, that's the difference between making the game easier and making onboarding of the game easier. I've been talking about this for years. Like, what if EVE was a learnable game through play? And they've come a long ways with that.
Yeah.
exactly.
Functionally, like just as CCP Rotati was saying, like buying Plex, it was super easy to do. You just make it alt in Jita, which is like a little clumsy, but I think EVE players get used to that just for checking prices.
Everybody has an opt-in.
Yeah. But when you were talking about selling it, especially if you've got small,
I would say not necessarily reducing the learning curve, but making the learning curve more meaningful, right? Like, having pieces of the learning curve be basically gotchas sucks, but having the learning curve actually be learning is good, even if that requires setbacks.
amounts, that's where things like your skills come into account. So you can't necessarily just throw it to your alt to sell 5 or 10 Plex here and there. So you just end up hoarding it a little bit or holding on to it.
Yeah.
And then you're just kind of sitting idle in these wallets. Now there's like a little bit more incentive. If you do have these skills, your like trading skills, you can then list this stuff without like without worrying about the penalties, because like market trading, they're all like small percentages. So if you don't have your skills max, you don't have your standings maxed, then you're already losing out. So it's just like, I'll hold on to it for a rainy day. And then there's that mentality as well. Like, what if I want to make a skin? What if I want to do buy something in the New Eden store? Like, if I'm not next to a market like Jita, then I'm going to need some sort of stockpile of Plex. Like, that's at least my mentality as a player, is I always keep a few hundred Plex in my wallet in case I want to just like buy something and I know I'm not going to be able to bounce back to Jita. So now that's just going to be, I'll be able to pop on the market, grab the lowest price no matter where I am, it goes in. I won't have to worry about holding on to like 200 or 300 at all times.
And it's going to be way more of a simple thing where it's like everybody should just have their position on Plex. You know, you just have a buy order up on Plex. It's going to make the buy orders far more aggressive on Plex, I would say, because it's like you just completely remove the barrier to having to go to Jita or log in your Jita alt or manage all this stuff. It's like you might as well just have a buy order up at a certain price that you're willing to spend for Plex at all times.
But that's also survivor's bias.
Yeah.
Like everyone has an alt, not the people who quit before they figured stuff out.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that's also like I'm always wary of the, like, that's how we do it in Eve, because like we're missing out of people who just like missed those things. I think I mentioned that also, like contracts are a scary thing. Like in let's say you come from World of Warcraft, there's a player market and you just kind of inherently trust the player market. Like it's buy and sell. Contracts, it's kind of like, okay, it's player to player, but it's not like a handshake thing like you do in like Ironforge, where you actually drop the thing in, both press yes, and kind of like, it's more like, oh, am I gonna buy something from a contract? Like if I'm 3 days old in the game, very unlikely. Like it's very archaic and kind of difficult to get.
It's also just it's a system. It's not really an application or something. It's a system you have to go through to just search and find and everything like that, and regional and such. And even though there's loads of warnings, you know, it's like, oh, this is 85 billion, not 85 million kind of things. It's still there.
I've been scammed on the contract system dozens of times.
That's just because you're so positive when it comes to these things.
There are so many, like, Eve players are just too smart. They figure out these weird interactions that, like, when they were like developing the contract system 20 some years ago, no one was thinking of like how are players going to screw each other using this system.
Nope. But I've quickly learned that we have to think about a lot of these things, and we can't think about all of them. That's absolutely the case. We're talking about this now in regards to Plex, but you know, friction-free trade is a term that I've seen thrown around quite a bit. Maybe more of a philosophy than something else. But why not more items like this, and what could we potentially see moving there in the future? So
I think that's absolutely the idea, is to figure out what makes sense in the Eve economy. Like, we don't want to break anything, but we do want to simplify things. And there's a few listed items. I think there's a currency aspect that we can deep dive into, and there's also this physicality digital item things that we can dig into, specifically cosmetics, I would call out. They're kind of digital or you know, physical items. Yeah. To me, a cosmetic item, because you're jump cloning, you're doing stuff. It just means that you 3D print your clothes wherever you are. Like it just does not compute. Yeah, CCP Ratati downloads his clothes. So just like, no, I have to jump, like do my home station to pick up my pants. Cool. Just like does not make sense in the future. It just
my body gets printed with my mind just thrown in there. But my pants, I got to go back for my pants.
So and this is one of those things that we talked about when we were talking about the dev blog, where there have been different compromises at different times because of CCP's like kind of goals, as this idea that everything must be physical, everything must be destroyable, was like an early truism in Eve, and piece by piece that has been kind of given up. And one of the very first pieces is the fact that if you put on a piece of clothing, you cannot lose that piece of clothing. And every single time that we go down this step, now obviously, like, to purists, we're losing a little bit of something, but at the same time, like, once you get past that threshold, the question is, it's like, why really is it a physical item? And this represents very much like a paradigm shift. It used to be that everything on the market still has a physical location, right? When you buy it, it is in a specific station, and it is in that station and has to be moved from that station if you want it to be anywhere else. Everything still has a physical location when it's on the market. And Plex is going to be the first thing that has no locality. So, I mean, it opens the door to a concept. I don't know if I necessarily call it a slippery slope, because I think that there just is design space for this kind of thing. So there are some things that, while they have been traditionally physical items, it may not necessarily be interesting to the overall design of the game for them to actually be that way, right? Like, for instance, clothing. Does clothing being a physical item really do anything to the gameplay of the game besides force people to go to JITA in order to figure out what clothing they want, right? Like, it doesn't really promote secondary markets. It doesn't really, technically speaking, it makes it so the rewards have to be brought to JITA. But like this idea that clothing that you don't have on could theoretically be lost, it was a rule that was created because of the policies of back in the day. And so, like, if you give up that idea that, yes, there are going to be things that are not physical, and if they're not physical, then they can't be destroyed. And once you've gone past that threshold, now you can go back to some of these previous decisions that have been made and think about it, right? So clothing, but then also, like, there are a lot of other caveats that have been made in the other direction, where there's a lot of stuff that can be used by or that get bought by PLEX that end up being able to be used by anywhere, right? Like, if you have a skill injector, you can use that skill injector regardless of where you are. So once again, it's a physical item that has a certain amount of non-locality, right? Because you don't actually have to physically be there to use it. You just have to physically be there to buy and sell it. So skill injectors could be another theoretical item that is on the spectrum of physicality versus digital. And it's just a question of like what works and what doesn't work, right?
So in
I'm not
my
gonna stand up in this podcast, that's for sure.
in my head, you own a license to print pants, whatever you want. That's what's happening.
Can I
And
borrow your pants printing license?
and
Well, it's funny is what he's saying here, and they're joking, but like one thing to realize is that every time you get potted, you see your body and you don't have pants on. These are you're being authorized to represent yourself as showing this, right? This is they don't print out a set of your pants every single time you get cloned. That's just your official Concord image, your Concord registration image.
what needs to happen is you just like we do like a convert to digital item kind of, and then you have like a clothes vault or whatever, like a wardrobe or whatever. Like that's like the easiest thing to do in the world, like conceptually. Like technically, we'll figure that out.
I made a blog a long time ago called "Sweet Dreams Are Made of This," which speculated that the entire captain's quarters was a simulation and that we never actually got out of our pod, and it was all made up by Concord in order to try to keep us under control.
But those are like, to me, the easy obvious wins. I think there are things like the sequencers. They should just be a commodity. There's no reason to have like a skin sequencing item that's restricted to JITA. We see that it's kind of limiting the creation of skins in the first place. So the idea was always to have this as a commodity, easy to access, easy to get, but it just isn't panning out this way. So we'll figure that out. I think that's an easy, there's no contention that makes sense, because it's not pay to win. Who cares? And then I think the bigger aspirational goal is like, isn't skill extraction very weird? Like, to me, skill points are a currency. It's just currency that you trade over time. And we allowed the trade anyway. So why are we doing 400,000 skill points and 800,000 skill points? Very abstract. Why can't I just get 75,000 skill points that I need?
A specific skill.
Yes, or a skill, whatever. Just like on demand, not from CCP, still from players, but just like make it easier than go buy skill.
I still think that players shouldn't sell skill points, but we've talked about that before.
Inject, just have a slider in something that says like, I need this many skill points. They're all player made. Just let me inject them. It's fine. I think that's the obvious thing. And I like the idea of just like paying with whatever I have. So let's say you're in the market.
I mean, Jeff, I think I don't see a reason why I wouldn't. Again, like the way to look at it is, what is the value of moving around skill injectors? Why are we requiring / rewarding physically moving them? What are they lore-wise? Well, I mean, the problem is that already falls apart by the fact that I can use a skill injector that's in JITA right now when I'm in Dixie or whatever, right? So like any physical interaction with the skill injector in lore is not relevant here. Yeah, exactly. Nico, I think that might be kind of what my argument is that like whether or not this is good, like the effect that it's going to have on the economy has already happened. Like these are already digital currencies. We're just like we have these vestiges of how they operate. That leads to some negative behavior, like people having JITA alts that don't necessarily need to have JITA alts. And we could just streamline this whole process and not actually lose anything because we've already crossed that Rubicon. Now, the damage that is done by buying and selling skill injectors is already like processed. It doesn't matter whether or not they have a physicality in that regard.
Kid, you want to buy the a Marauder, and it just says like which currency you want to pay in. Do you want to pay in IS? Do you want to pay in PLEX? Do you want to play in skill points? Like they're all interchangeable anyway. They're just like super difficult to figure out the right exchange rate. You can sell the skill injector on the market and get the money, but buy a PLEX. Like it's all there. It's just like removing that bullshit, saying like here, it's easy to do, and it's very dystopian and it's really cool. And I imagine that myself in just buying milk for blood. That's how I think of it. Go to Kronan or local store and just like pay whatever, pay with DNA or something.
If you're going to do that, I will bring a camera. It's like
I think
for the community.
Yeah, I think it just makes sense.
And
you know, this also goes back to the fact that a few years ago they said that they were going to get rid of attributes and make all skill training passive, and like this really feels like a big piece to that, but they haven't mentioned any progress on that since. So I don't know.
Someone wants to start writing poems and stuff and blood. So
it's funny that you say that, Jeff, because like literally this is the opposite of NFTs. They're trying to make things more fungible.
let's why not?
Yes.
I do not support the idea though, but I get what you mean. But I really like this theory on like a thought on the skill points. And when you say the way you say it, skill points are a currency, it's a very, very good point. It's probably the most sought after item in New Online.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's what I need most.
One of the biggest successes, because like this whole philosophy that you've been talking about, this isn't our first foray into it. Like I think that one of the most successful things is loyalty points.
Yep.
Like being able to trade loyalty points between groups. We've seen just how impactful this is to the ecosystem. It allows corporations to tax their members or even get donations in loyalty points, trade them between one another, turn those into dreads, which turn into like crazy massive dread brawls just like a couple weeks ago. And it's had like a tremendous positive impact in that ecosystem.
So I think
I really wish that CCP would actually dive into that particular topic more, because like they did do the changes to LP. It'd be nice for us to circle back. And I don't remember anything from FanFest about this, where it's like, let's look at what has happened with LP, because that was a very significant paradigm shift with allowing LP to be traded. And it's had good and bad. And I think that it would be good to have like a check-in with that. And I'd love to hear like actual justifications. Well, that's the thing. Like it is part of a rework. So like I would love to see their justification of like what, like he just said, it's been a very successful change in how things happen. I want to dive into that topic more. That'd be cool.
we talked about LP taxes first.
Yeah.
It was very uncool, like 100%. Like, first of all, it's not a tax, like it's not a CCP tax. It's more like we tried to rename it as tithe, kind of like you pay 10% to the Catholic Church, like in the olden days. This was more like what do you pay to your as a membership fee or something like that. Just like the ISK tax isn't a tax, it's a tithe.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely, like you said, it revolutionized how that audience or that player group was able to take that dead money. It's the same thing with the 5-7 plexes. You had loads of like little LP that you've been like hoarding or getting through missions over time. You just couldn't get rid of it. You couldn't use it for anything. And now you're able to
I think data cores are just too important economically.
do it because of like trading, which is you're able to turn that into investment. It's just turning wealth. That's capitalism. Turning your stuff into something that pays you back. More fun, more or less, not necessarily more money in the future, but like being able to use it is the key thing.
The thing that I think was the biggest thing about the LP tax and all that sort of stuff and the LP changes is it comes back to a concept that I believe in very strongly, which is that collective problems demand collective solutions, right? Like everybody in a faction warfare group, every single person needs to figure out how to spend their LP. And so that means that what to spend my LP on is actually a collective problem. So if we could somehow pool our LP, and so that way we could collectively figure out how to get value out of that LP, then we could have that be how everybody just gets value out of it, right? They don't want LP, they want ISK for their LP. So how do we give the member ISK and turn the consumption of LP into a collective problem that we can solve as a corporation.
So LP is a hugely interesting thing. I'm not sure that I want to have the same kind of complete freedom in trading it, because then I feel we've lost like something unique out of the game.
Yeah,
like,
you lose the
otherwise it's just like
nuance
ISK.
between the two, yeah.
So there has to be some kind of nuance, but like making it easier to do, and we owe some quality.
Socialism more than communism, but you know,
Of life things for sure in the LP ecosystem. But we have plans around LP.
Actually, we already can do it. We were doing it in our corp, and we can do it again when we were more active in faction warfare. It might be interesting to do, where basically we put a tax on our LP, but then we also have a corp project that pays you to earn LP. So you earn the LP, we pay you out a certain amount for that, and then we basically take. So we say, okay, we're going to pay you 1,000 ISK per LP. We take 20% cut, but then make the percentages such that you basically get paid 1,000 ISK per LP for every LP that we take. And so now you just get ISK and we collect LP, and then we can figure out how to spend that LP as a collective. That's already very easy to do in the game right now.
Probably like more next year, but they're more about like figuring stuff out around this LP tech debt that we have, transaction ledgers, for example. But also just the LP stores. They are one of our oldest content. They hardly get price changes. They hardly get new inventories. There's nothing. It's just been the same for.
The thing I've always wanted to have added to the LP stores is the introduction of standings influencing things that you can get in the LP store. I want to be able to get different things by having higher standings, so that way, not the same LP isn't worth the same amount for two different for different people, right? If I get 8.0 with Sorum or with Kartham, I should be able to start selling Sorum skins because I can buy them off the market or off the LP store, and now my Kartham LP is worth more because I've got a thing that I can buy that most people that get Kartham LP can't buy because they haven't ground all the way up to 8.0. So now there's niches within the LP markets to make it so that, loyalty with that corporation actually increases in value.
Like 2 decades almost, or whenever.
Are there already opportunities? Yes, you can. So you can pay people out for earning LP, and you can tax that LP. So yes, the effect of that is, like I said, we take 20% of your LP and we pay you 1,000 ISK per LP. Like we did that for the first couple of months when we were in Angel Cartel successfully.
It was
There's
introduced.
very much a fixed gameplay loop.
It's
for
just
those that are getting a
fixed.
lot of LP,
Yes.
they go and purchase the same items, they bring them to the same place, sell in the same way. So there's not a lot of
No, and
variety.
And there could be like ways to influence like a limited supply, something to create some kind of interesting gameplay. And when do you invest in LP items? When do you think it's going out of stock? Like stagnant gameplay or predictable is like the worst. So I think we could move a lot of interested capitalists into that space.
And honestly, the LPs, like what they're describing on the LP store, like the manifestation of this is that the spending of LP is the most boring, complicated, difficult, and biggest barrier to entry to being truly successful in faction warfare, right? Like I said, this is everybody's problem. Everybody who's in faction warfare for any amount of time has way too much LP and doesn't know how to spend it. Everybody needs to know how to get the best out of their LPs. The high sec buyback programs and stuff like that exists. But like ultimately, like it is not an interesting puzzle to solve, and it's a constantly like finicky problem to solve because everybody's got. It's such a big, it's a competitive space that hasn't changed in any significant way in years.
If we start having more dynamic offers, products, etc. in the LP stores. And I also think it kind of sucks from an LP perspective that there's not also just like a really cool things that you buy for yourself in LP stores. It always gets reduced to this kind of ISK per hour calculation. There's no aspect of loyalty. Where you buy a soulbound thing or something where you're actually like, I earned this, I have level 10 rank.
One of the interesting things that I want to point out about LP Store, a very insightful thing, when we were talking about LP back in like 2019, before, like back when the idea of being able to trade LP was kind of poo-pooed by Hilmar, like the thing that he was talked about it was the loyalty point store, the reason why it's called loyalty points is it's supposed to be like frequent flyer miles, right? It's supposed to be a kind of a trick that the corporations, like a special incentive that the corporations are offering you in order to get you to work more for them, right? As you build up with them, then you get to unlock like cool perks that you get because you're continually working for them. And I actually really like that idea, and I think that should be preserved in all of this, and I think that feeds a lot into what he's talking about right now, where it'd be cool if the loyalty point store had things that, like, more things that you got not because you just want to sell faction ammo, but it's like, oh, I need to make sure that I have the cool jacket, although there are some jackets and stuff, but like, I think that EVE Online need titles and stuff like that too, but either way.
Rank, standings, I have a rank.
Well, Jeff, it is kind of strange to see Cal Mill flying executive Navy issues, but what's fun about that is that, like, you know that basically the use of executive Navy issues is funding your enemies. Like, people can use whatever ships they want. A good example of this is, like, in all of our market stuff, we try to make sure to purge. We every once in a while we catch Navy, like Caldari Navy hybrid ammo in our fits, and it's like we need to purge that from our fits because that supports Caldari militia instead of Galente militia. So we try to promote Federation Navy hybrid ammo instead of Caldari Navy hybrid ammo, even though because mechanically they're the same. It's just about who gets paid for it, and I really kind of like that. It is I mean, like, is it immersion breaking? No, but like, you're seeing different pressures, and if you're like, if there was a pressure to economically starve out your enemy, then you actually would see Caldari steer away from using things like executor Navy issues. Instead, what you see is them being very spiteful of the fact that they're forced to use executor Navy issues.
Rank. Why don't I get like special stuff? Why is it all the same?
Yeah, where's my golden Megathron because I have
something
with Galente Navy or whatever.
Yes, exactly. Something. It could be cosmetic. It doesn't have to be paid to win or anything else. But just like, how do I show that I'm a loyalist? I've been in the NPC militia, faction militia for like a decade, but I really have nothing to show for it when I'm flying with other pilots.
Yeah.
So I think there's like a lot of interesting stuff there.
But on that topic, with a global flex market, the other global market we have is obviously the Paragon Hub. I was listening to you.
Here's a question. If you could buy a medal that is displayable on your character for LP, I wonder how many people would buy it just to say that they've done it. Like, if it was like 1 million LP for like some commendation that basically just shows that you spent 1 million LP for that commendation. I bet you people would want that.
Chatting with Oz the other day on quite a few
LP for faction standings would be a cool idea too.
There were questions in there just on the global kind of trade and market and uniqueness of items. Like, you know, instead of golden Megathron, the only
a skin rather than a medal. I mean, what if it was a pack?
Megathron I would love more is the one built by Swift.
Yes.
If I'd have a made by CCP Swift, I'd treasure it. It'd be a Hanger Queen probably though.
I think that's a dream that has been like becoming more realistic over time. So like there is a conversation in the devlog about like, or an explanation of what singletons are. Singletons are basically unique items where which are like actually unique.
So what he's talking about here is actually NFTs, not like NFTs as in like monkeys, but like the idea of non-fungible tokens, right? Singletons.
Stored uniquely in the database with you call it EU UID, unique.
Like
I would only trade it for things that are useful somehow. Well, I mean, like, there are different players with different things. Like, you know, that's a very utilitarian mindset, and that makes sense. For somebody who's more of an achiever, the fact that there's something just cool, there's an achievement to get by just dumping a bunch of LP, that might be worth more to some people than ISK, right?
Pistols and
yes, like a mutated item, and that does have like made by. So like you have your signature there, but like 10 years ago, there was this like we were in different, or 20 years ago, we were in different space from a time and place around databases.
Yeah.
So it was all about like conserving storage, etc. Like now we have like AWS. Everyone has thousands of gigabytes of pictures on.
Yeah, people pretend that like there are a lot of people that think that skins are not useful, but there are people that have come to me that have wanted me to make the skin for them just so that they can say, like, the thing says that Ashtarothi made the skin or Punch made the skin or, you know, whatever. You could make it yourself, but then it wouldn't say that it was made by that person. And that is a real thing. Like, it's not a big thing right now, obviously, but like that maker's mark concept is something that people do desire, and they seek them out in the ways that they can have them, like with Abyssal mods and with skins
on Amazon Cloud or whatever. So it's a completely different game, game for that. So we're not limited.
And we're not talking about designing the entire reward structure around cosmetics. We're talking about having that be an aspect of it. We're not saying take away from the utilitarian function of LP, but it doesn't take away from the ability to buy ammo with LP to also add the ability to buy a medal with LP. That's just an addition.
Buy these things anymore. And we also had a namespace kind of like, or like a digit. Like we couldn't have like infinite numbers.
Yeah.
We have now infinite numbers of unique UIDs. We'd have to basically not run out of numbers 10 years ago. Now we can basically have infinite numbers, and this is just how databases have evolved.
And then you're talking about the unique IDs of
of items, just storing all of them.
You could create, because it's been, I mean, forever and been around for a while. We could start playing around with similar stuff to what happens Middle Age Plus, I guess. Anyway, when you start.
If you're reworking LP, utility should be the number 1 consideration. Well, I guess my point is that like this is this isn't necessarily suggesting a rework. This is about kind of like how can we work within the current system, right? I think that, like I said, as far as a rework goes, I would say that the biggest change that I'd recommend is adding standings as a mechanic to the LP store. Like that would be the rework of it. As far as like getting the most value out of the LP store as it is right now would mean like we could experiment with putting in things that are, you know, effectively achievement based or achievement tokens, not just ISK.
Looking for your first car and you kind of, oh, I found that exact car, and it's like something that makes no sense to buy because it was a shitbox back then, but I'm still going to restore it for like 10 times the value of a new car. It's
Yeah.
like
Yes.
peak. If I could find a 4X from 2004, I'd love it.
Yeah. Even the original look, that would be even cooler.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
with the dent.
Yeah. So this is basically like if everything were unique ID, we'd also blow up the inventory, because that's a lot of unique things. There's like trillions of items in the EVE database. If you couldn't package them all to be like, okay, but these are commodities. These are all the iron scraps. These are all the ships. It's also like you need some conservation, but the idea is to have just a distinction of custom things. Like a custom thing is a multi-plasmid item. A custom thing is a player-made skin or an artisan skin. And we can evolve that, but it needs to be like an action to convert something like on purpose into a. We can't.
Becomes a handcrafted
yes.
kind of.
Yeah.
So let me tackle this for just a second. Basically, you know, there's only so many items in the database. Every item in the game, everything in the game has a type ID, right? Like we can go here and pull up a random Hobelix page with something in it. We can see, look, everything has a type ID, right? So every new item, new thing, new creature, new set of stats or numbers that CCP wants to put in has to be an entity, and it has an item, and it has to have an ID. And so there's only so many basic types of things that they can have. So they can't have every single module that's created be its own unique thing, because then it would just continually be, you know, an unlimited amount of type IDs of the things. But individual instances of a thing can be a modification from the template. So the best example of this is mutaplasmids, right? So like you would have a 10MN afterburner, which has a type ID. You could look it up. But I mean, int max is true, but also like it'll become rough to look things up in that database long before you hit absolute. And it's not integer maximum, because you could also just do like GUIDs are often alphanumeric. So it's more than just int max, because it's more than just int. Like, or, you know, it doesn't have to be, I guess. It looks like their type IDs are ints, but either way, the point is that so hold on. If you have like a 10MN afterburner and then you mutaplasma it, the effect of the mutaplasmid is just a set of modifiers. And one of the things that are in that aspect is what its base type ID was. So wasn't he complaining about BPCs? Those should be instances too. Yes, actually, BPCs are actually the same thing, right? That's why anytime that there is a BPC, there has to be a BPO added to the game, because all a BPC is a copy of a specific BPO, and it targets it in its record. So in the same way, your Abyssal Afterburner points to the basic 10MN Afterburner and then applies modifiers to it. And so this is how they make dynamicism within the database. They don't just make it so that every single individual thing is its own individual item. It's that everything is a modification from the baseline. This is true about the Abyss. This is true about how they work out systems now. Modifiers can be applied to different systems to create different effects. Modifiers can be applied to a lot of different things. And that's kind of and with the skins, even Skinner, there's just a DNA that is the formula that when applied to the model of that ship successfully recreates that skin every single time, right? So that's how they're able to, so they have the base database, which is this is what things are. And then they have a table of specific instances of those models. These prototypes, these archetypes. Yeah, so the types are the archetype, and then an instantiated, an unpackaged module or an abyssally rolled module or whatever is an instance of that archetype, which is why there's a difference between stacked items and unstacked items, packaged items, unpackaged items, because an unpackaged item is its own singleton with its own story. Once you package it again, it becomes fungible. It becomes just an archetype.
Mastercrafted, handcrafted, or something. Yes.
Does it get a bonus?
Which is a big problem with the whole crafted by blah, right? Because things that are crafted by somebody are often managed a lot of its time in archetype form, right? Where it's just, it's a stack of 15 afterburners. If suddenly we have to keep track of the fact that 5 of those 15 were made by this person and 5 of them or 10 of them were made by this person, that actually makes them 2 different afterburners at this point. So that information can't exist while they are packaged. So these artisanal details really only exist in things that do not become repackaged. So things like BPCs, and things like abyssal mods, skins, etc.
I'd be wary of that, but I don't know. It could be.
This isn't even ancient Eve code things. This is just code things. This is just how data sets are built. Now, granted, a lot of it has to do with decisions that were made back in the day or whatever, but this is still pretty much the way that you would have to build it now if you built it from scratch. It's just you would prioritize different things. They've learned to add these modifiers over time, and some of our systems don't actually handle that really well. For instance, kill mails were never designed to transmit the modifications of an abyssal roll. It's not built into the kill mail reporting system. So when you see an abyssal mod, it just knows it's an abyssal mod. It just goes back to the prototype, which an abyssal afterburner prototype doesn't have any of the details, so it can't give you anything, right? But if somebody links you that specific mod in the game, you can then put that into your fitting and all that sort of stuff, because the transmission in game does send the modification data as well as the prototype.
I pay a premium for a 0.something% increase.
But that's just a
something
mutated item, right?
Yeah, but it's handcrafted by somebody who is.
Yeah. You could have
I mean, half of it is locked behind code that is so old and fragile. I wouldn't even necessarily say that. I think that Eve is an incredibly complex system, and it isn't the fact that it's so old, it's so big. Like as it gets bigger, and like the fact that it is old does matter because different decisions were made at different times, and obviously some of the code is probably less understood, especially by the people nowadays. But a big part of this is just incredibly complex systems, and we're inventing ways to manage these kinds of things. I can't stress enough how like MMOs are less than 20 years old. As far as like human history goes, that is fucking nothing. They are solving problems that have never been solved before on scales that have never been tackled before. So we got to keep that in mind. Like it seems pretty obvious to us, but like this is the bleeding edge of technology. They're not just having to build code, they're also having to build these systems. And those systems do have to cooperate with the previous systems. And there are limitations to that, and there are constraints to that, and that causes them to want to tend towards solutions that they can implement given the framework rather than changing the framework. But I mean, the bottom line is that like this is an incredibly hard project. Yeah, they often, well, that's also part of the reason why they've spent a lot of time in the last 6 or 7 years explicitly bringing in people to help them integrate this stuff, and why, like, it seems like they've gotten a lot more aggressive when it comes to not allowing technical debt to hold them back. It is really hard to build a train as it's moving. And I think that Frontiers is actually a big piece of this too, because it's allowing them to kind of experiment on a less accreted, I don't know, less accretion, less buildup, less fluff, or like the detritus of time and decisions made over time in order to experiment with the actual like social mechanics, mechanical, like economic mechanics, etc.
Maybe the way there would you need to have crafted 500 of this item, or depending on the size of it. Like it would be super interesting kind of way forward.
So you're basically like at the center of this is that how do you treat these handcrafted items or mastercrafted items, because you can't stack them today.
Is there much talk about AI's impact on Eve? Well, so part of that is like sort of taboo, because like a lot of people are going to hear botting as soon as you talk about that. Although there is a couple of organizations that I've seen that have kind of promoted themselves as being led by ChatGPT. I've used ChatGPT a little bit to get information about Eve, but unfortunately, like ChatGPT is not really the correct tool for that a lot. You can get problems with that. I don't know exactly what you mean by that, but certainly I don't think that they talk about it in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So like we still haven't found a way to stack these.
You don't stack handcrafted stuff anyway.
Yeah, but like what if it's like ammo? You can't create a stack of mutated ammo, for example. So like that like is also stopping the adoption, because you can't have a predictable supply or inventory of like this mastercrafted thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes like more of a specialist, super kind of like hard PvE, top tier abyssals, whatever. So it becomes only the playground of the masters in some way. But I think there's a way to kind of bring it down to the like more a common usage to have more fun with this. So that's something that we can entertain for sure. But other singletons are like,
you know, arguably the first iteration of like the first inklings of this very notion is rigging, right? Because rigging is supposed to be like it is the thing that kind of like the reward of it having it be a singleton as a like it's the first piece of artisanal. It's the modification that you have made to the ship. It's the way in which your ship is not just fungible with every other kind of ship. And so I think that like when we think about things like ship mutaplasmids, I think that rigs are already trying to fill that solution. And so like they should theoretically work together. I don't know. I like the idea of like, I get what he's saying here. Like adding artisanal pieces to Eve is important, but it's also important to be smart about it, because there are certain things in Eve that just for functionality purposes need to be fungible, like bullets.
like packet ships. And these the artisan skins. So we're basically just we're adding a new type, trying to figure out how they are.
It's layering. It's just a layer
Yes,
upon a
it's
layer.
layers.
It's a layer.
Yes, all unpackaged ships and modules are singletons, but they are singletons that could be made back into fungible. So they are fungible with a cost if it's rigs, right? They just aren't currently in a fungible state.
They're just like it's been done here for 2 decades.
And some things actually don't even have to be an item. I mentioned it, like ship fittings, for example. There's nothing stopping us from just like trading, sharing ship fittings in a more like natural.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit, Cavalier, about like AI being able to be useful for assisting in things like converting the code to Python 3, but definitely not the discussion for today. But it is interesting. Like AI is a big topic.
Way than just having like a tiny little box in the fitting window. Like there's no way to like in the context of a ship browse the like cool fittings, just like the skins or whatever. Like so that like there's a case to be made that a lot of our gameplay is just hidden, just so deep, so hard to find. And then even we abstract into, well, we're not even going to do that in client, we'll just do PyFile or something. So like I want to like level the playing ground for like more people just interacting with contracts and stuff like this, so they actually get into the like real gameplay.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. Like players are really good at kind of showing us through the amazing tools that they make, kind of the appetite that they have for certain things.
Yep.
Like players have made like an abyssal mutaplasmid marketplace. That's kind of like, it's a bit clunky because it's linked through contracts and you have to kind of know that it's in there to be able to look for it. Like I don't think a newer player, and there's nowhere in the NPE that shows like, oh, if you want to mutate these items and you get really lucky, you can trade it over here. And that's where you find the marketplace. So like, you know, ship fittings.
That's cool gameplay.
Yeah, there
really
are guides
cool
for that out there, and just like a whole bunch of different things. There was LP trading that was very clunky and ghetto, where players would like be in just a chat channel and be like, hey, I've got a million Concord LP. I want like 3 Megathron not Fed, that would be amazing. Navy Megathron BPCs. I'll trade you a little bit of whatever this is in there. So it was like, it was clunky, but there was an appetite for it because people really wanted to be able to do that.
It's I always remember back when I started playing like year 1 of Eve. You would have the kill mills with fits, but like I had no clue what I was doing. Like I would just ask, you know, hey, how to do this or what? And I was always hoping for almost like a black box kind of thing where I could recover the secrets of the ship that and I could trade that potentially. Like, oh, I have Ratati's black box from the Dominics I ganked. You know, is that a fit that people want to pay something to know what is on there? I always found that really intriguing, but at the same time, I'd hate for new players, for example, coming in and just being so far behind because they wouldn't know what to fit. But I'm pretty sure the two of you are going to agree with this. One of the most things I do in Eve is when I get into a fight with something that's super unexpected. Like just last week, we ended up fighting a retri, just a normal retribution, armor plated and artillery fit. And it was really strong, and it made no sense, and we had no idea how to counter it during the fight because we didn't understand what we were fighting, and it was amazing. Yep. You know, thankfully we got it, so we saw the kill match, but you know, it was really cool.
I think it's the idea of like the freedom to be, like not in the meta, but like there's a way to be just like whatever you want to fit and see if you can make it work. I love the idea of just like, nope, I'm going to go against the meta. I just want to be like this particular thing. Doesn't make just only shield regen or whatever. Like it's never competitive, but like it's your fantasy. It's the gameplay that you imagined would be cool. And I think that's like amazing. I think there would be way more appetite for like this kind of gameplay for a new player if they, like you said, like had access to, okay, there's a mutaplasmid mark. Like I didn't know what a mutaplasmid was. I don't know what these are cool items. I don't know that these are like rare items. So maybe even if it happens to you, like it's cool gameplay. If you mutate an item and like you get a really good crit on the roll, you're like, okay, how do I price it? Like I'm just gonna be scammed. Like there's no, like it's just like,
yeah, it's super intimidating. It's the one that was like, I was trying to get into this marketplace, and I've got 20 years of EVE experience. I know what makes a module good, but trying to price like a really good rolled micro warp drive, like I had no idea what I was doing.
That's
like,
literally a skill for people.
Yeah.
Just
well, what's interesting here is they haven't talked about it yet. Maybe they will, but one of the big limiters of the contract system is there's no contract history. So when you're looking up a mutaplasmid, like a rolled item, like a abyssal mod, you can see what people are trying to sell it for, but you can't actually see what has successfully been sold, right? And so the true value of things don't really emerge and isn't very visible. And this is also true, ironically enough, about the Paragon Hub, right? Like you can put things up, but even the person who sells the stuff doesn't have a history. Like Punch has been complaining almost daily about the fact that he can't like go back through and see what has worked and what hasn't. He has to kind of remember or infer or maintain a spreadsheet or something like that, because there is no history to contracts and Paragon Hub purchases, which is absolutely insane. And so like a lot of these problems that they're talking about are actually directly stem from that fact alone.
Watching an episode and saying, "Oh yeah, that's 100 mil or a bill."
Yeah,
it's like they reach like the max apps and especially the low slots can reach like 10, 20 billion. You know,
Being
plus.
like an art appraiser.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
Exactly.
There's no like you can't just Google it. It's it's whatever it is.
There is data to go from, and I'm sure that if you create if you get a big enough data set, there is something that could be done there. But the arts, it's just so much more romantic.
There's some finesse in it. Yeah.
Master crafters and all that.
Yeah.
I like that. Let's jump back onto where we kicked up with the PLEX market. I want to ask a couple.
Do I think that contracts should be a separate tab in the market? I mean, that'd be really good for visibility, to put it like to unify the UI a little bit. But I think that that would be a piece to the puzzle that I don't think that by itself solves anything.
A couple of essentially just practical questions. When it comes to market orders, contracts, stuff like that, that's already up, what happens when this gets introduced?
So the existing market orders that exist, so contracts aren't going to change, as Tati was saying, but existing market orders that are up, they'll all get canceled on the day of the patch when this gets.
They're talking about PLEX. This is all PLEX orders. So anybody who's buying and selling PLEX on the market, this is what's going to happen.
It's introduced.
So the existing market orders that exist, so contracts aren't going to change, as Tati was saying, but existing market orders that are up, they'll all get canceled on the day of the patch when this gets implemented, and we'll let you know like what date and time that is. It's just we'll let you know what date that is ahead of time so you can prepare.
It might be.
It is going to be on the 7th of July.
At downtime.
It'll definitely be at downtime. That's why I was like, it'll be at 11. I can tell you that. But all your broker's fees will be reimbursed, so you won't be kind of like out any money. And then when the new global PLEX market is there, you'll have to just relist the stuff.
So essentially.
Yeah, it would seem that contracts that involve PLEX are not going to be canceled, correct? How long ago was it that they announced it as an idea? The 27th. So 7 days ago. So what? 10 days between, 10 days from announcement to implementation.
Essentially, the strategy is if you've got loads of it already, just don't think about it. Market orders, that is.
Yep.
Don't think about it. You will get refunded because the company stopped dealing with you tried to trade with.
Yeah.
And I think that this is important. Like this is true because A, it's very much on like a higher level than a lot of us, but also like B, this isn't something that CCP needs to like allot us a lot of time to prepare for because it's making things less restrictive. So, they could just make the change tomorrow and it wouldn't like nobody would have to like realign themselves to operate in this new paradigm, which is one of the reasons why they often give us a lot more warning about a change that's coming. Like, for instance, the standings changes that's happening to faction warfare and pirate faction warfare that's coming in like a month or two. They announce that now so that way people have time to like make their preparations for it. But there's nothing for us to prepare for when it comes to this. So there's no reason for them to have to give us a whole bunch of leeway before they implement it. It wouldn't do any good. Like, it doesn't matter. We're just waiting for it to happen. And the longer we're waiting for it to happen, the more confusing it's going to be. Yeah, Equinox gave Null an entire expansion before it was pretty much on.
Yeah.
And you will need to relist on the day, and it will show up in the PLEX.
Yeah, it'll just be like
vault or in the inventory station. Do you know?
Just when you go. So it'll go directly back to your PLEX vault.
Okay.
So you're not going to have to worry about items that are stuck anywhere. And then when you just go to access it again, it'll just be on the market as normal. Like you just type in PLEX on the market, You'll click there, and the only difference that you'll see is that you'll be able to see like through all the regions.
So basically, we saw it the other day on the test server, but it'll look like this. Check it out. So if we type in Plex right now, we see this. Do you see how so it says quantity, jumps, quantity, price, location, expires in. So just imagine the jump and location columns gone. Like it just shows quantity, price, expires in. And that's it. When you search for Plex, when you search for anything else, it shows all of the columns. When you search for Plex, the jumps column and the locations column is just gone now.
And so when you buy, you can just sort by price, quantity, the whole shebang. So functionally, nothing really changes apart from you just having to relist. And that's only from like a technical reason. There's CCP master plan was trying to explain to me why, but like my eyes started to gloss over and like I wasn't really sure, but I trust CCP master plan.
If you get that name.
Yeah.
A lot of like
not
server
trusted.
proxies and things that needed to like it wasn't as so it started with what if you just remove regions from the thing, you just like don't show me like if market orders equals X, just remove that part. Like what happens? It's more or less that. So like the regional market is simply that, but obviously behind the scenes there's like Sol nodes and server proxies and things that like we're like okay, I guess it's not that easy. But this is a toe in the water.
Yeah.
Like it's not like a proper forex exchange, but it's like a really good experimentation of like how do people treat it? Like does supply go up? Does demand go up? Does the price fluctuate? Do we get this dead Plex on the market?
Do we get more people interacting with it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just really good. I think it's a great forward step.
So I want to close this off with a question to both of you. If we think about the concept of friction-free trade, and now I'm going to ask you to take off the hat of we are announcing something and we're just going to hypothesize from a personal perspective. What would be kind of the dream thing that would happen globally, frictionless, kind of on the market in the future? And let's remove technical boundaries like we were talking about, like the master kind of crafters and stuff. What would kind of be the dream item just for you guys there?
For trade.
Yeah. Or dream change, essentially.
I think I'd like to figure out how blueprints work. Like blueprints are
Obviously not a digital item. Like these are hand-drawn.
yeah, absolutely.
When you
absolutely.
go and copy a blueprint, there's just an army of really good sketchers just sketching up from the first one.
Yes, yeah. They roll out these paper and just like no. I think blueprints have like a lot of these conversations actually started around blueprints because I was approached 4 or 5 years ago by a DevOps database engineering who told me like, you know what is the biggest load on the server? It's calculating the state and ownership of every blueprint in the game, because all
Does that include copies?
Yeah, because every researched or like changed blueprint has become a singleton. So they're all stored as singletons. So they're the biggest load on the database.
Even though there's probably a million Mjolnir rocket small copies that are max research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're all on like crushing the server every morning. It's the biggest kind of like database job that they run. And from any survival game, like if you treat EVE as kind of like, okay, how do blueprints work in normal other games? You just get like a blueprint book. You find the blueprint. You have like it goes into your book, so you can like I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna make this. Obviously, EVE is harder, but we are storing blueprint copies in containers, and it's all very archaic. It shouldn't be this hard. There's a lot of new players who never get the satisfaction of just like I'm gonna make some ammo. I'm gonna craft something. I have fun doing stuff. So I think this would
and the copies will be on contracts. They will not be on the market.
Yes.
So it should be the other way around, essentially, where the veterans they would be buying expensive blueprint originals to trade with, or use as commodities or as a passive income.
Yes.
They can find it in the normal place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this becomes something that we can solve like really well. The only thing that we need to solve from a design perspective is like it is cool to lose blueprints. It's cool to have to move them and sometimes die and lose them.
Especially with
And that's something we keep on coming back to when it comes to like, as we've been talking all day about what should or shouldn't be a digital commodity. The thing that I go to as my metric is what is the value of it being a physical item, right? And the idea that blueprints have to be protected and where they get put and all that sort of stuff and how they can get stolen. You know, once upon a time, we had our blueprint collection stolen. Like this is a huge piece of the game. So I would absolutely be against like the value of BPOs and BPCs as being physical items that have to be moved around and that have to be worked on, that have to be copied, that have to be all this stuff. Like that's good, but there are definitely problems that come out of like massive amounts of copying. And it also is just so, it's weird. I feel like there might be some space in between where you do have your blueprint collection and it's easier to manage, but at the same time, you do have to worry about keeping it safe and keeping its resources available to yourself and to the corporation, because that's the big thing, right? It's about, this is very operational security, not secrecy, but like making sure that your supply lines have integrity, right? Making sure your blueprints are safe and available is a consideration, and the physical nature of blueprints are what kind of enable that in the game. So I think it'd be nice to tackle blueprints while still preserving that aspect of the challenge, if that makes sense.
With limited availability of industrial sites and stuff like that.
But it's not necessarily for like a Tech 1 ammo stack or whatever. Like you need to just like have fun with it. So we've talked about like maybe there's you have to download like onto a USB chip something if it's rare, and you actually have to move that, kind of like taking a Plex from the vault and putting in, like retaining a little bit of the fantasy of like the loss, because I think that is fun. But like,
I mean, making them expire is like a way to clean it up, but it only solves one aspect of the problem, right? Like, I think that, and this may be like my own perspective because I've got thousands of research blueprints at this point, but like, I would love to see a better way to manage your blueprint correct. I would love to be able to like open up the ship browser and pick a ship and have it automatically pull it up in the industry window with my blueprints and say like, oh, you do have that at blueprint. You don't have that at blueprint. Or look at a fit and be like, you can build all these different pieces of that fit, like more industrial awareness tools or management tools or integration in that sense. I think that would be really cool. We have a tool on our website that allows like members to request blueprints from other people. So like our API, I registered my blueprints so people can put in requests for me to copy the blueprints for them, for our members. So we do stuff like that. And I think it would be cool to somehow integrate that more into the game, because like, so what really, like, each blueprint has runs, copies. Each blueprint copy has runs and their current MENT and its location and all sorts of stuff like that. But ultimately, like, we'll need like multiple of them in order to be able to run multiple runs. And like some of them are owned by the corp, some of them are owned by players. I feel like there's something there. There is a lot of friction in the maintenance and working with blueprints that ends up with things like them needing to be on contract, them being this kind of, everybody ends up with just a shit ton of copies of all kinds of different things that they don't really need. Everybody's always trying to give me stacks of capital BPCs because it'll be useful to somebody, whatever. Like there's something there. I just don't know 100% where we could make improvements. And like I said, there's some really important aspects to the gameplay, i.e. the protection of it and the logistics of it, that definitely need to be kept in mind if we are going to do like a rework of how blueprints work, to make sure we preserve those goals.
Like I think this would like make a lot of stuff like way more accessible and fun for a new player.
Like for instance, so 2 Atrons, 2 BPC. So like right now, if I want to build 20 Atrons, I can get 4 BPCs of 5, and then I can run that as 4 lines. But if I have 1 BPC of 20, then I can only run that as 1 line. So I have to have these extra BPCs and kind of split them out into numbers, which is like part of the decision process of making a copy. But is that even necessary? If you had 2 blueprints that have the same exact ME, TE, and type that it's built for, shouldn't you be able to just split those or merge them as much as you want? If I've got 2 BPCs with 5 runs each of Atrons at 1020, why can't I just make that 1 BPC of 10, and then if I need to, like, run it, either split it or run it as multiple times or whatever. Like, I feel like there's a certain amount of like multiplication of BPCs that if BPCs are ending up being a problem, isn't contributing to the actual industry gameplay. It'd be cool if we could just have, like, here's the original, and here's all of the runs that we have copied of that original, right? Instead of each individual BPC having its own set of runs and its own unique world that can't be merged with other BPCs of exactly the same type. Right, yeah, exactly. And make them, like, right now when you put in a run, like, that BPC gets locked into that run. We could break out the whole idea of having, like, a BPO can only be done in one thing at a time. But a BPC, like, your stack of BPCs should just be like BPCs, right? And it would almost even be cool if, I honestly think that the BP, like, the most extreme version of this would be, I would say that BPOs should be a physical item no matter what. I would be willing to be convinced that BPCs could be a digital currency, could be a non-physical currency, could be a resource that you have or that the corp has that isn't necessarily tied to a specific location. Now, obviously, getting copies from the Blueprint original to where you want to build with can be a consideration. Like, if you want to keep your BPO safe, you'll want to copy them in HiSec and then move them to, like, wormhole space if you want to use them in wormhole space or something like that. But I feel like, A, that process is trivial enough, and B, is still replicated enough with things like Faction and other BPCs that cannot just be copied, that you're not really losing much by having it be that way. And I think it could be very interesting, especially for, like I said, not necessarily like Faction BPCs. Oof. See, there's a lot of edge cases. This is a much more complex issue than a simple answer. But I think that BPCs could go more towards the digital way and definitely preserve BPOs as being a thing that you must protect, preserve, and defend. Maybe make it so you can make a BPC from a fully researched BPO. No, I don't like that, because there's plenty of other things, especially at the higher end, where it's like, especially like you buy a brand new, like the Upwell hauler comes out, right? Or the Upwell freighter comes out. The decision to research ME versus begin production immediately, or how much to research before you begin production, becomes a very interesting problem. So I still like the idea that, like, as long as they have the same exact stats, ME, TE, and type, then they should be able to basically be pooled together. But I almost would like to see, like, open up a UI that shows all my BPCs, not as individuals, but as products, right? Be like, oh, I have, if I look at Atron, I have 14 runs at 1020 and 5 runs at 10.0, right? So that's kind of where I was thinking, which is why I want, like, BPCs to be more digital. It's an interesting idea. It's an interesting thought.
I'm personally like I'm always a dwarf in games, and I like crafting, I like resource gathering. So I'm like
Dwarf
like,
hunter here.
exactly. So it's just like, I like doing this. I like having the recipe. I feel that it kind of marks my progression in some way, how many collections I have or whatever. So I think it's just like core to an MMORPG to have, like, oversight of my blueprints. And I think I'd love to try to fix that, like, by the end of this journey.
It sounds like something that, you know, if we weren't this far in, could be redesigned basically from the ground up. But obviously, this is just such an integral part of the game now, so everything needs to be sensitive. But I agree with this, because also, like, when opening up the contract,
ironically enough, BPCs and BPOs are closer to a global market because of their requirement to be on contracts. You can see them from anywhere. Like I said, I don't know if I'm willing to make BPCs fully digital. I like the idea of, like, part of the thing is that I think that the industry window is trying to do too much at the same time. And I think that it'd be cool for you to be able to browse your blueprint library and availability outside of just the constraints of, I'm trying to, like, the industry window of what I'm trying to build right now. Like, the example I had earlier was, like, while looking at your ship fitting window, maybe there's a thing that shows you that you have BPCs available for it or something like that. Like, if we do production, maybe I should be able to pull up a fit and not only see if I have all the skills to do it, but whether or not the corporation has all of the BPCs to do it. Again, these are kind of niche things, and like I'm not sure whether or not it's worth the development time per se, but like that's the kind of things I'm thinking about. Like I don't know.
Right. If I'm there day 2, I'm on the air career program to get somewhere. I do believe we get a good blueprint in there though, but if not, you go into the contract and you know.
Well, like just a little symbol, and like, or it could be really cool for like a corporation manager to see that like our stockpiles show that we don't have this. Like it maybe like we'd be able to look at something and see what our stockpiles are, see what our BPCs are, and all that stuff, and then right from there, right click it and create opportunities, corp projects directly out of that window, so that way we can like look at the project, see what we have progress on, and then create the projects for the pieces that are still missing. Right? This is a management perspective, not an individual production perspective.
You have a blueprint copy and a blueprint choice, and
I was thinking like not necessarily for the fitting window, but in the same way as like when you're looking at the fitting, you got a little check mark that shows that you have the skills. There could be other icons to show that you have the ability to produce it, for example.
And when you get the copy, it's like 10 runs, there's efficiency, there's time. There's like, why does this cost 10 times more than this? And it's not in like the market hub where I can see, oh yeah, the item is, 20% cheaper next door or whatever. And it's confusing and it's scary kind of.
Very scary. Shouldn't be.
What about you, Swift? Do you have something?
Like it could be cool if like, so we could designate as a corporation where our blueprint library is. And so we point it to that, and that gives a UI that allows people to do stuff with it and maybe even print copies off of it that is like more protected, because we've tried to do things like this before, and like with the permission systems and the container systems and all that stuff, it wouldn't be cool if the corporation can own a bunch of BPOs. We put them in a specific hangar in a specific place, and we designate that as the library, and then anyone who's in the corp could actually just run copies off of it as long as it's not actively in use. And like corporation directors can cancel people's projects for them, or off of it if they need to manually override it. But like as long as the BPO is available for copies, you can just go in and copy it, and it drops in to your item hanger as a member of the corporation because that's available, right? Like that would be a good way to like reduce friction in the management of BPOs.
Yeah, I mean, so I really love the idea of.
Would it be more useful to combine material? I think that the research system is interesting and valuable. I wouldn't necessarily change the research system. Runs, again, like, so there's a balance because basically the amount of time it takes to produce it and the amount of time to make a run is balanced together. So it's a question of whether or not, like, basically what BPCs allow you to do is kind of front load the time requirement for a thing, right? Instead of building it right now, we can like pre-build it by making a copy. But that also takes time. And so like, again, there's gameplay there and there's decisions there. So I don't necessarily like the process of making runs, I think is valuable. It's the maintenance of those runs that ends up being a problem. Would be an interesting feature for an ISK sync. Use NPCs to handle what you're just talking about for a fee, or trust castlers to not screw you. Well, that's why I was saying like this would be corporation management because corporations are supposed to be handled on trust.
The like a blueprint marketplace type thing, and the way you were talking about it, this is also kind of how players try to arrange it themselves. Like they'll throw their.
You also need to consider the amount of runs multiplies the ME savings. I agree. I think that is not a sufficiently good reason to cause people to fragment out the BP. Like if they didn't say that the biggest load on the database was BPOs and BPCs, then that might be a good argument. But I would say that like that is a relatively minute like thing to preserve, as opposed to allowing people to just condense like copies into. Well, again, Nixie, so the goal here would be like you'd be able to run your BPCs in parallel. It's just you would now have one pool of runs instead of having to decide whether or not you're going to split them into copies or not, because the thing is that by basically the current run system encourages you to have multiple copies of a BPC instead of one big BPC. And the database would much prefer you to have one big BPC. So we should actually move towards having big BPCs and having that be usable by people, than encouraging people to have split BPCs, because that's just more of a load, right?
Very expensive blueprint originals into a station container inside a corp hanger with a very specific access. You can only read from it, can't really move it, but you can still kind of access it. So it's kind of already there. But really, what I think
yeah, he's talking about what I was just talking about.
And this is something that you've talked about, CCP Ratati, is having like more granularity in the market when it comes to like taxing structures.
Yeah.
Like just different types of commodities clumped together. So like maybe it's cheaper to trade ammo, but if you're trading PLEX, it would be at like a different kind of rate. And just having just more control over that and making the market a little bit more engaging without it being like every single item has a different tax bracket. Like that would be insane. But like the different groups having a little bit more.
They like that. So that is a very like, we run a free-to-play game, blah, blah, blah. Like having a bunch of different tax brackets, the big advantage to CCP is that means that they can like make a weekend where frigates are 0% taxes or whatever, right? Like they can do different kinds of specials, which allows them to have more specials and more varieties of specials happening at different times.
Yes.
Which can be cool.
I think that would,
especially if that is related to, like, if they can tie that into mechanics of the game. Like one of the things I've always thought about is like, as an empire loses in faction warfare, perhaps the rewards in that faction warfare go up, but the taxes on those structures go up too, as the empire is attempting to raise additional funds.
like open up like trading a little bit more.
It should be as simple as possible, but variations are where niches are born and opportunities are born.
Especially probably in player-owned structures where you could have variety, kind of chosen by the
Yes.
Yeah,
players.
exactly. So yeah, maybe, and then you can have fun with like, oh, maybe in Minmatar space, Minmatar ships like are a little.
A good example of this is actually like industry fees, right? Industry fees go up dynamically based on the amount of industry jobs that are being done in that area. So we already have things like this in different levels. Like, I think that there are room for that. It's just about building that dynamicism into the system. Like right now, the entirety of the market is assuming the fact that there's basically one fee, two, whatever, the fees that exist. The idea of it being a granular thing is just would be a lot of work more than anything.
A little bit taxed a little bit less and things like that.
Yeah, you're on. If there's a specific goal that a group, a corporation, or alliance or something is trying to reach, is it deployment in mining form, or is it a war or something like that? Is there no tax on doctrine related stuff to either the mining or
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's great. You're making a great case for a tax code change.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I struggle with this internally and externally to like sell some of these tax code improvements. Looks
And also, like, fiddling with taxes, like, being a tax accountant, look, this is, guess what? This is EVE Online is a game about real systems, right? Like, there's a reason why a guy was able to found a Fortune 500 company after playing EVE for a long time. It's all, like, on the industry side especially, that's what this game is all about, is about supply lines and market fluctuations and forces and blah, blah, blah. And taxes is a part of that. That's a part of it.
tax or kind of like VAT in some way.
Yeah, I kind of zoned out just at the word tax. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's not super sexy to be like, oh man.
Well, industry side is already extremely hostile to new players, but at the same time, though, what's fun is that adding in more complexity in this case actually can make things easier for new players. As like the changes that they made to the industry program or to the industry system actually did help newer players, because the more niches there are, the more likelihood that there's something relatively simple that a new player can get in on if they figure it out early on. It's easier for them to get a victory. Right now, given like if it's a solved system, then those new players are directly competing with all of the people that have already solved the system. But if it's a constantly shifting system, then a player that engages with that system will be able to find opportunities, you know?
So where does
in our
that turn
game get
into
more
exploding
taxes?
spaceships?
Yeah,
Is all
yeah,
I want to
yeah.
know.
That's the idea.
Like a couple of accountants would probably get like really excited by it, but like our brand team's probably like,
I am.
dude, what are you thinking about? Like, we can't have a tax expansion.
No,
We'll
we
make it
struggle with the
April
LP
15th.
tax.
Do you know
LP
what?
taxes was
Yes,
impossible.
Yes, we could. Let's do it. Let's say it would be an insane kind of way to just go out into the world and say Eve's economy is so big and so cool that we made a special expansion to the game around taxes.
Yep. I like it.
I mean, gate fees already exist.
We're not going to do that. I think it's time for us to wrap this one up. Ratati, Swift, thank you guys so much for coming around and explaining this. Now I don't need to read the devlog. I can just listen to, well, I don't need to listen to it again, but you know what I mean.
I think you'll be able to find opportunities, but normal new players won't. Well, realize that like every day I'm talking to new players in order to help them find these sorts of opportunities. So I'm not like completely out of the, whatever. But I also remember like what it was like 10 years ago versus now, as far as like answering these questions about like what to build as T1 and, all those sorts of things. So, no, because like the fact that there are simple things to learn, like it used to be that it's just, building T1 ships is just useless or whatever. But like more so now with things happening, like you can look at like a new player can still pay attention, right? And in fact, a newer player might be paying attention more closely to something than the experienced players that already are set in their ways to be able to do it. Like new players are looking for a thing to get into. But if everything's already established, then there's nothing for them to get into. There's nothing for them to find. If there's always shifting things, then there's always a thing that's happening now that if they get in on it, they can like do good about it, right? Thanks, Jeff. But yeah, I'd be interested to know what you guys think in the comments below. And let's go ahead and keep this discussion, because obviously this is going to be kind of an ongoing thing as we enter into this new world of prosperity or whatever in EVE Online. The PLEX changes are happening on the 7th, which hopefully I'll get this edited and out before then, or I'll probably try to release this about then. But this was, I think, a bigger discussion about what this means and how we can evaluate EVE Online and kind of how CCP is looking at it, how the player base looks at it, and how we can see it as like a set of systems that need to be healthy. I think that this was a good conversation and good discussion. I appreciate everybody who's participated in it. And like I said, please leave comments down below if you have any more thoughts. I feel like this is something we're going to keep talking about for a little while. But all that said, I have been Ashtarothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put EVE into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you guys so much for watching, checking out the stream, and liking, commenting, and subscribing. Doing all of those are very, very important for the algorithm and for you, so that way you get the latest in my news. If you're watching this as an edited video, please be aware that we do record these live most weekdays. Go ahead and join the Discord and give yourself as interested in YouTube if you want those if you want updates as soon as they come out, and also feel free to come and join on the Discord and just hang out with us, ask questions, whatever. As long as you're polite and nice, then we'd love to have you there. And of course, the Convocation of Empyreans is recruiting. You can use we are here to maximize player engagement with EVE Online, and we would be happy to have you here with us. If you are new or returning to EVE and you have not gotten your 1,000,000 free skill points, please consider using the link down below or in the chat in order to get your free 1,000,000 skill points. It does help those who help make the show and the convocation possible. And of course, I want to thank personally my top tier or immortal tier supporters: 745 MPSI, Erdenika the Queen, Bad Boy Smooth, Evo Elite, Erlitus, Alanje, Flash Gordon, May, Malik Starfire, Malin, Mercuton, Mayak, Nihilum, LM1, Sheesh, and Rid. Thank you guys so much, and thank you to all of you who have watched this video, liked the stream, shared it with a friend, because we are here to increase player literacy, because this is actually a big thing that we just talked about. A lot of this, it's not just about EVE being a good game, it's about players being aware of how things work, players being good, like players as in knowledgeable players making meaningful decisions within the game, because a better player base equals a better EVE Online. So thank you guys so much for helping me in our project to raise the literacy of EVE Online within the player base. And with all that said, I have been Ashrathi, the voice of New Eden, and until next time, I'll see you in space.